Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 199. Shizun's first disciple. Ah, who is it? Is she the only one who can command Mount Huang? What about the other descendants of the one who subdued the vermilion bird's evil spirit? Mo Ran did not answer him directly. Instead, he said, 8,000 years ago, the one who subdued the vermilion bird evil spirit was called a cultivator named Song Chiao. His courtesy name was Xin Yi. Xuemeng turned pale with fright. He blurted out, the Lord of Huobi, Xin Yi. Yes. Wasn't he the last butterfly-boned beauty to become a grand master in the history of cultivation? Mo Ran expressionlessly replied, that's right. Therefore, the last person who could open the gate to Mount Huang died in the tribulation fire in Rufeng sect. It was Song Kaiyutong. Xuemeng's mouth involuntarily opened wide. Just as he was about to say something, there was a sudden commotion in the distance. A large group of green-robed cultivators from Beaten Manor suddenly surrounded the barrier at the foot of Mount Huang. Manor Masterly. Manor Master. Chu Wanning's expression changed slightly. He walked over and pushed through the crowd. He saw Li Wuxin being supported by his disciples. His face was as white as paper as he spat out a mouthful blood, there were even scarlet traces of it was stuck to his white beard. His lips were pale and his eyes were rolled up. He was already unconscious. He said in a trembling voice, he is the first, he is the first. Due to Li Wuxin pulling back, the remaining sect leaders suffered even more backlash from the barrier. Huang Xiaoyu was the temporary hall master of Jiangdong Hall. His spiritual energy was weaker compared to the other sect leaders. At this time, he could not take it anymore. Even turning his head was difficult. Zhang Shi, on the other hand, looked at Li Wuxin. Even though his face was also pale, he examined him and said, he is under the influence of the Phoenix Nightmare. The barrier of Mount Huang was imbued with the curse of the Phoenix. Once someone tried to tear open the barrier and attempt to climb up the mountain, they would be swallowed by the nightmare. This was similar to the illusion of Jinchinj Lake's Zaixin Lu. However, the Phoenix Nightmare was hard to get rid of. It's been said that those who were affected by it would not wake up again. Seeing this, the Beaten Manor disciples knelt on the ground. Some of them even began to cry, Manor Master. Wake up, Manor Master. Li Wuxin laughed and talked in his sleep. Suddenly, he broke free from his disciple Zhen Kongming. He lay on the ground and began to dance, laughing, first place. First place. First place. Among the disciples of other sects, someone whispered, what first place? Li Wuxin, however, was not going to answer them. Immersed in the joy of the nightmare, he opened his mouth, revealing 2 rows of teeth that were sticky with blood and saliva. He laughed in an extremely intoxicated manner. After a while, as if the nightmare had suddenly turned for the worse, his old face that was as dry as a dead tree stiffened and revealed an expression of anger. You promised to return the secret scroll of Beaten Manor to me. You. After a while, it turned into a sorrowful face. Li Wuxin had always been careful with his reputation as a cultivator. Moreover, as a sect leader, he was someone who had never shown this kind of face in front of others before. The way he looked and acted now was not something a cultivator, much less a sect leader should be. Fact was, he didn't even look like a man at this time. His face was contorted in grief, as if he was trying his best to stuff his dignity into the wrinkles that covered his face. He begged, 8 billion gold is really too much. That secret sword technique scroll was originally from Beaten Manor, it belonged to my own Shizun. But at that time, the sect was destitute and had no money left. I had no choice but to sell it to you. Sect leader. I beg you, just a little less. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. 8 billion gold? Secret sword technique scroll? Then someone suddenly remembered that the former sect leader of Beaten Manor had a strong temperament. He had righteously and straightforwardly provoked the attention of many sects in the cultivation world. When the sect suffered a great disaster, no one was willing to help him. After that, the entire beaten manor declined day by day. They couldn't even allocate enough money to subsidize their disciples for 3 years. Then, for some reason, the sect suddenly became rich again. But inexplicably, after that generation, the water-cutting sword technique of the beaten manor, which was once famous in the 9 regions, fell into decline. The disciples who came after could not use the essence of it. Because of this, there were always people in the Jianghu who ridiculed Li Wuxin. They said that it was because he didn't teach well that the beaten manor, which used to be the sword saint's manor, fell to the bottom rank of the upper cultivation world. But now, everyone was shocked to realize that things might not be as simple as they thought. Could it be that the beaten manor overcame their financial troubles by selling the secret sword technique scroll? Who was this opportunist who took advantage of the situation to gain profit? Some people immediately thought of Gai Yuye sect, and many gazes secretly swept over Jiangxi's face. Could it be Gai Yuye? It could be the predecessor of sect leader Jiang. Li Wuxin was still struggling and rolling on the ground in pain. Zhen Kongming couldn't even hold him. Li Wuxin cried and screamed, and then he simply got up and kowtowed to the people around him. Blood and snot flowed down together on his face. "Give it back to me. I've raised the amount for most of my life. I've raised the total of 5,100 million gold. I've really tried my best, but I really don't have that much money. I can't kill, rob or do any kind of deplorable things for money, can I? Your sect earns tens of thousands of gold coins every day, but the beaten manor really doesn't have that much money. I beg you." Hearing that the sect earned tens of thousands of gold coins a day, those who hadn't looked at Jiangxi before began to pointedly look at him. Jiangxi's Xianyuan pavilion was the biggest black market in the cultivation world. Who else could it be other than him? A young disciple of the beaten manor was so angry that his eyes were already red. He shouted at Jiangxi, "Sect leader Jiang. So, the 3 most important scrolls of our beaten manor, the water-cutting sword technique, is in your Gai Yuye's hands. You want 8 billion gold coins for them. How can you be this shameless?" Before Jiangxi could even speak, someone on his left said in a hoarse voice, "The truth hasn't been revealed yet. How dare you accuse sect leader Jiang?" The person who spoke was actually Huang Xiaoyu, who was almost out of breath. This old man's hands were trembling as he held the barrier. He still wanted to speak up for Jiangxi to show his loyalty. His intentions were clear as day. The beaten manor disciple was so angry that he rushed up to scold Huang Xiaoyu. However, he was firmly held back by his fellow disciples, who advised, "Zhenfu, don't provoke them." Hearing this name, Mo Ran was stunned. If it was in the past, he might have thought that this name was the same as really smart, making people laugh their heads off. But now, as he looked at the rotten old man who kept kowtowing in the mud, he suddenly felt very bitter. He couldn't laugh at all. If 5 billion gold coins isn't enough, then how about 5,500 million gold coins? Li Wuxin was crying. He kept wiping his tears with his sleeve. "I can raise up to 5,500 million gold coins. I'll go to Yizhou's Chang clan and sell some magic tools and spirit stones. Yes, I'll still be able to get 5,500 million gold coins. Sect leader, please do me a favor and be merciful. Just return the secret sword technique scrolls to me." He bent his head and kowtowed until his forehead got cuts and started to bleed. "The water-breaking sword technique is the soul of beaten manor," he cried. "Before my late Shizun passed away, his only wish was for me to retrieve the sword scrolls. I've tried my best all my life. All my life, my black hair has already turned to white. I have begged with you as well as your father. I've even begged Luo Fenghua." Ah! Everyone suddenly turned pale. Luo Fenghua? Li Wuxin had begged Luo Fenghua? It wasn't Gaia, it was. They all turned around, but no one was moving. However, they immediately parted ways, because almost all of the people from the various sects were turning their heads to look at Nangongsi and Yewangzi in the corner. It's the Rufeng sect. This time, there was no need to whisper. Someone yelled. How shameless! I was just wondering how the Rufeng sect's swordsmanship suddenly improved so much in the past few decades. They even have the style of a sword saint. Bastards. Back then at the Lingshan Mountain Sword Conference, they even gave Nangongsi third place. Stolen sword techniques are nothing at all. This is so disgusting. Nangongsi stood in place with a stupefied expression. Of course, he didn't know about the evil scandals of the Rufeng sect. The atrocities that his father and ancestors had committed should have fallen on the heads of the 72 cities of the Rufeng sect. Now, he had to bear all of it alone. He didn't run away, nor did he make a sound. His expression was ashen as he stood there silently. Yewangzi wanted to shake his hand, but Nangongsi quietly pulled it away. He stood in front of Yewangzi. He actually has the face to come. His father was such a beast. What kind of son do you think he'd have? The people of Beaten Manor were the most indignant. They shouted at them, "Get lost! Why are you still here? The Rufeng sect is no longer among the 10 great sects. What are you standing here for? Get lost! Adulterous people! Shameless!" Impassioned voices rose and fell from the surroundings. They were cursing and spitting, and their faces were clearly filled with hatred. Suddenly, someone rushed over. It was a disciple of Beaten Manor. That person grabbed Nangongsi by the collar. Yewangzi immediately shouted, "Aussie!" Nangongsi barely managed to push her away in the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint. Then, that Beaten Manor disciple pressed him to the ground. Fists rained down on his face, chest, and abdomen. One punch after another came. They didn't use spiritual energy, but the fist was heavy, fierce, and wild. At this time, another cold voice suddenly said sternly, "Stop." A heavy punch landed on Nangongsi's handsome face. Nangongsi coughed up a mouthful of blood. His hair was disheveled as he lay on the ground covered in mud. That angry disciple wanted to throw a punch again, but his arm was grabbed by someone. He angrily turned around and spat, "Bastard! I don't want you." He couldn't continue his words. Because the person standing in front of him was the #1 cultivator in Jianghu, Chu Wanning. "Stop." Chu Wanning's eyes were like a cold spring. He looked down at the disciple with an indescribable expression. It seemed like there were many emotions on his face, but it also seemed like there was nothing. He just tightly held the youth's arm and pursed his lips. After a while, the Beaten Manor disciple said incredulously, "Stop fighting." Nangongsi coughed up another mouthful of blood on the ground. Yewangzi hurriedly tried to help him up, but she was waved away. "Don't worry about me. I should take responsibility for the Rufeng sect in place of my father." That youth got more furious. He struggled to break free from Chu Wanning's hand and wanted to fight again. Chu Wanning's sword-like eyebrows rose. "I said stop. It's none of your business. You're someone from Shi Sheng Peak. This has nothing to do with you." That youth also went crazy as he roared at Chu Wanning, "What right did they have to treat our manor master like this? Why? Why are they treating my Beaten Manor like this? Beaten Manor has been acting like a beast of burden for the Rufeng sect for so many years. Why? He began to wail. Behind him Li Wuxin was moaning and begging. Li Wuxin was still begging Nangonglu, who only exists in his consciousness. Luo Fenghua said he was willing to exchange the sword scrolls to me, but he doesn't know where it was kept. You promised me. Sect leader, you promised me. I'm 79 years old this year already. I don't have many years left to live. In this lifetime, My cultivation level isn't high enough. Maybe I won't be able to become an immortal and see my Shizun, but I can't fail to do the one thing he entrusted me with. Li Wuxin's every word was like a blood clot that had been dug out of his throat. He was also wailing, I cannot fail to do this, sect leader, give it back to me, give it back to Beaten Manor, back to this old man. I beg you. The Beaten Manor disciple was trembling. Chu Wanning's hand was also slightly trembling. The youth's eyes were filled with tears, hatred, and confusion. But he couldn't break free. In the end, he spat on Chu Wanning's face and said, What Grandmaster? They're all bastards. Shizun. Mo Ran, stand there and don't move. Don't come over. Chu Wanning let go of the youth's hand. The youth regained his freedom and immediately went to beat up Nangongsi, who was already covered in cuts and bruises. But unexpectedly, a ray of golden light fell and a Haitang barrier formed, firmly protecting Nangongsi and Ye Wangzi. Chu Wanning was originally half kneeling on the ground. At this moment, he slowly stood up and looked at the blurry faces that were watching the commotion. At one end of the crowd was him, while at the other end was Li Wuxin, who was weeping blood and tears. Li Wuxin's old voice was heard. It was like the winter's branches piercing the blue dome of heaven. Is 5,500,000,000 gold not enough? In the nightmare, this old man was still trying to bargain with Nangong Lu. He was dying piteously. So piteously humble. So much so that his old face had turned into mud. What about 5,800,000,000 gold? His voice was trembling. Chu Wanning closed his eyes. His hands were also curled and trembling under his wide sleeves. However, he still enunciated word by word, Nangongsi is the son of my old friend Rong Yan, Madam Rong. In front of Mount Huang, where there were more than 1,000 people gathered, silence reigned. It was so quiet that what could only be heard was Li Wuxin's howling and Chu Wanning's cold and stern voice. On one end, Li Wuxin was saying, 5,800,000,000 gold should be enough, right? Those are only 3 sword manuals. On the other end, Chu Wanning said, when I left the mountain, I didn't bring any money with me and I don't know how to ask for it. It was Madame Rong who gave me a meal and allowed me to temporarily stay in the Rufeng sect. He paused. Thus, only the sound of Li Wuxin's sobbing could be heard. Madame Rong once asked me to accept her son Nangongsi as my disciple. Because I was young, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to fulfill the task, so I didn't agree. But that year, Chu Wanning slightly turned his face and glanced at Nangongsi, who was lying on the ground. He finally and slowly revealed the truth that Nangongsi didn't remember, word by word. That year, Madame Rong brought her young son and kowtowed to me 3 times in front of the ancestral temple. She said that with this Nangongsi's obeisance ceremony to his mentor was complete. If I was willing to stay in the Rufeng sect for a long time in the future, Nangongsi should treat me as his Shizun. Chu Wanning raised his eyes. Nangong Si is my disciple. Hearing this, Shuemeng's face instantly turned ashen. Mo Ran and Shi Mei's complexions weren't very good either, but they didn't say anything. They just looked at Chu Wanning with wide eyes. If it's true that a son should repay his father's debt, then a mentor for a day is a father for life. Since I've accepted Nangongsi's 3 kowtows, he can call me Shizun. Chu Wanning continued, his mentor is still here. Therefore, whether you want to seek revenge or insult him, I am here and will not resist. Shizun. Shizun. Mo Ran, Shuemeng, and Shi Mei all knelt down. Nangongsi also struggled to get up from the ground. The blood in his mouth hadn't stopped yet and he could only mutter, no. I won't kowtow. I haven't kowtowed. I don't have a mentor. I don't have a mentor. However, at this time, Li Wuxin suddenly let out a long howl. He raised his head to the sky, his hair and beard fluttering like snow. His eyes were wide open, and blood continuously flowed out from his eye sockets. He howled, he cried, he choked, he stammered. 5,900,000,000 gold, that should be enough, right? Sect leader Nangong, 5,900,000,000 gold coins. Just take the extra as pity on this old man and leave me some money for my coffin, please, please. He raised his neck in a posture as if he was about to be killed. Finally, he screamed, his veins bulging. Please. Immediately afterwards Li Wuxin suddenly vomited blood again. Then, he fell to the ground with a thump. This was the manor master of the most inferior sect in the upper cultivation world. This was the old man who had always deliberately curried favor with every sect he could, wandering everywhere like a clown. This was the big joke who had tried his best most of his life but could only be mediocre, who could not even retrieve back 3 sword scrolls. A good-for-nothing, a mediocre person. Just like that, he fell into the grey dust with his eyes wide open. Dead. The wind whistled. Everyone had different expressions on their faces but no one said anything. At this point, Mo Ran suddenly remembered that there were treasures on Mount Qiao, enough to revive a sect. This was something that even Zhang Donghal knew. Since the Beaten Manor and Rufeng sect had a close relationship, how could they not understand what this signified? After Nangong Liu's death, many large and small sects chased after Nangong Si and Ye Wangzi, wanting to capture them alive. They said it was for revenge, but in their hearts, they were all thinking about those mountains of gold and silver. However, Beaten Manor was not one of those. Beaten Manor just clumsily thought of stupid ways to forge relationship with Shi Sheng Peak and Gai Yu Ye sect, hoping they could count in their assistance in the future. Li Wuxin didn't even think about the Rufeng sect's hidden ancestral treasure. He was clearly the one who had been bullied and oppressed by the Rufeng sect all his life. Perhaps, it was because he had been bullied and oppressed for so long that this old man understood while wealth could be taken, it shouldn't be taken unjustly. Mo Ran looked at Li Wuxin's dirty old face in the dust, dirty to the point that it was somewhat funny. He suddenly understood why on that day when the Rufeng sect was in a state of calamity, while everyone was running for their lives, this old man wanted to escape but he was so timid that he didn't leave. He obviously didn't have any great skills, but he braced himself and stayed during the tribulation fire. A single sword saved dozens of lives that had nothing to do with him. People said that the Grand Master of Beaten Manor had a set of water-cutting sword techniques that could cut the flow of water and break the sky. He was known in the cultivation history as the Sword Saint. Li Wuxin didn't have these 3 scrolls, so he couldn't learn this amazing sword technique and therefore could not become a sword saint. The only thing he could do in the end was to use an enlarged sword to fly out those people he didn't know at all, some were even disciples of Rufeng sect, out of the sea of fire and bring them back to safety one by one. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 200. Shizun, Mount Huang opened. The disciples of Beaten Manor would never have thought that their manor lord would die even before the Battle of Mount Huang had begun. Although Li Wuxin was already advanced in years and his movements were gradually showing signs of senility, he wouldn't have died so suddenly if it weren't for the fact that his meridians were flowing in reverse due to the effects of the Phoenix Nightmare. After a moment of silence, the Beaten Manor disciples all knelt down. Their cries shook the heavens and everyone was shocked. The disciple who originally wanted to settle the score with Nangong Si couldn't care about anything else. He cried and crawled back to the old manor lord's side, wiping his tears with his sleeves. Suddenly, the huge barrier in front of Mount Huang let out an ear-piercing buzzing sound. Zhang Shi's expression changed and he sternly said, "Someone fill in Li Wuxin's position, otherwise we will all suffer the same fate." Xue Zhenyang simply turned around and shouted, "Yu Heng! Quickly come and help." Chu Wanning naturally didn't need them to repeat themselves. He was most proficient in barrier techniques. That whistle was the curse left behind by the vermilion bird's evil spirit. To be able to touch this layer of the curse meant that the sect leaders were not far from tearing apart the barrier. If they could push beyond this, then they would succeed. If they couldn't, then the backlash of this curse would have the power to move mountains and fill seas. It would be even more difficult to escape than the tribulation fire of the Rufeng sect. He immediately flew over. His gaze was as sharp as a bayonet. He waved his sleeve and raised his hand, fiercely striking the space left behind by Li Wuxin. As soon as he touched it, Chu Wanning was suddenly shocked. He immediately looked at Huang Xiaoyu, who was standing next to him. He saw that Huang Xiaoyu was sweating profusely and trembling all over. His face was flushed red, as if he was using all his strength to circulate his energy. The other sect leaders clearly thought so too. However, Huang Xiaoyu could deceive others, but he couldn't deceive the barrier Grandmaster Chu Wanning. As soon as Chu Wanning received Li Wuxin's burden, he immediately felt that the counter-attack from this position was extremely ferocious. In other words, Li Wuxin alone just now had to bear the evil aura of two sect leaders. It was rare for such a situation to occur in a formation where everyone worked together. There was only one possibility for such a situation to happen, and that was that the caster next to them did not use any power at all. Huang Xiaoyu was actually just putting on an act. Chu Wanning was infuriated. His black eyebrows stood erect as he sternly said, "You, how dare you fool around? What?" Huang Xiaoyu gasped for breath. His voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz. His entire body seemed to be on the verge of collapsing to death. When the surrounding sect leaders heard the commotion, those who still had the energy to spare also turned to look. "Grandmaster, what are you talking about? What kind of joke is this? You know very well what kind of game you're playing. Get the hell out of here." Xue Zhenyang couldn't keep his composure and shouted, "Yu Heng, why are you being so fierce to Huang Daozang? Look at him, he can't even speak. If there's anything wrong, open the barrier first and then talk about it later." Huang Xiaoyu's eyes drifted. He only glanced at Chu Wanning for a moment before he was frightened by those eyes that were as cold as an unsheathed frost blade. Truth was, he didn't have the strength to open the Phoenix barrier at all. Him taking the initiative to rush up and help out was all a show so that afterwards, he could let the upper cultivation world know that Zhang Dongtang's strength was still there and that he, Huang Xiaoyu, still had some skills. Unexpectedly, Li Wuxin, this good-for-nothing, actually couldn't bear the burden for two people. He unexpectedly succumbed to the backlash curse and died next to him. It was fine if he died, but the person who took his place was Chu Wanning. This was Grandmaster Chu, who deserved to be cut into pieces. Huang Xiaoyu's greasy face was covered with beads of sweat. These beads of sweat were no longer forced out but actually cold sweat. He was constantly sweating. He was thinking, what should I do? At the critical moment, Huang Xiaoyu fiercely bit his tongue. A stream of blood flowed out and he let saliva mixed with blood seep into the corner of his mouth. "Grandmaster, you really misunderstood this old man. After Villa Master Li withdrew his power, this old man really, can't. He coughed violently and blood splattered everywhere. This old man really can't take it anymore. How could Chu Wanning be fooled? Li Wuxin and Huang Xiaoyu, it was needless to say who was stronger and who was weaker. If both of them had used all their strength, how could the one who fell first be Li Wuxin? He waved his sleeve angrily and threw out Tianwen with one hand, which unexpectedly flipped Huang Xiaoyu more than 10 feet away. "Get lost." Ah! Zhang Donghal's disciples were shocked. They rushed up and surrounded their own senior. There were also many people who angrily glared at Chu Wanning. "Grandmaster Chu, why are you being so unreasonable? Elder Huang has already done his best. What right do you have to throw a whip and throw a tantrum as you please? You think you can bully people just because you have the ability?" Chu Wanning turned a deaf ear to these angry shouts and baseless accusation. His heart was full of anger and his pair of sharp phoenix eyes flashed with a frosty color. Perhaps it was the reflection of the red light of the barrier, but his pupils were even somewhat scarlet. Get lost. His voice was quiet, but it was extremely gloomy. Those who had a little understanding of Chu Wanning knew that there was still room for discussion when he rebuked or scolded. However, once he became like this, he would become cold and oppressive. Then no one would be able to talk him down. If anyone tried to stop him, Tianwen would probably take that person's life. Xue Zhenyang muttered, Yuheng, what's going on? Huang Xiaoyu, did you really exert any strength at all to open the barrier of Mount Huang? Chu Wanning's hand that was covering the barrier was so angry that the veins on his hand bulged. When Li Wuxin couldn't bear it anymore, did you really share the burden for him? What are you talking about? The female disciples of Zhangdong Hall screamed. Our elder Huang has already vomited blood and you still say that he didn't do his best? Do you have to see him die like Villa Masterly before you're satisfied? Chu Wanning's black eyebrows were burning. Just as he was about to speak again, the barrier in front of him suddenly shook violently. The palms of all the sect leaders were wrapped in a blood-red light. Zhang Shi immediately said, Concentrate. It's the last layer. It's about to be torn apart. Chu Wanning was no longer in the mood to argue with that group of lunatics. He turned around and focused his gaze. Placing his hands on top of the other, he placed his hands on top of the barrier. His powerful spiritual energy was like raging flames. It fiercely entered the rift in the barrier. There was a loud bang. The earth shook. A huge gap appeared in the barrier of Mount Huang. It was about 8 feet high and could allow 5 people to pass through side by side. Xue Zhenyang said happily, It's open, it's open. The barrier is open. He was close to the gap and immediately stuck his head out to take a look. However, he suddenly felt a black and red miasma rushing towards him. He couldn't help but shout, What is this stench? The other cultivators no longer care about Beaten Manor and Zhangdong Hall. They all rushed over to take a look. Liubei Temple's abbot Xianjing was the most sensitive to this. He turned the prayer beads in his hand and said in a low voice, It's a place where corpses are collected. I'm afraid there are more corpses and resentment on Mount Huang than we thought. Zhang Shi said with a gloomy face, It seems that street rat Su Xuanglin is indeed hiding in this lousy mountain. As he spoke, he turned his head and said, Everyone, listen up. Those who were injured before, those who were scared, those who were useless and acted all pretentious. When he said pretentious, his cold and deep eyes glanced at Huang Xiaoyu who was lying on the ground. Then, he sneered almost imperceptibly. These people will stay at the foot of the mountain. The rest, follow me. When Xuemeng saw Chu Wanning enter the rift in the barrier, he immediately wanted to follow him. However, he found that Mo Ran was not by his side. He looked around and found that there was a commotion where Nangongxi was. It turned out that the hatred of the disciples of Beaten Manor towards Nangongxi overwhelmed their grief towards the passing of their manor lord. Although Chu Wanning had set up a barrier there, Nangongxi was still surrounded by a group with twisted and ferocious faces. Every bright red tongue was cursing and spitting at him. Xuemeng said anxiously, Mo Ran, what are you doing there? Everyone is going up the mountain. Hurry up and come. You go on first. Protect Shizun and Shimei. If you can't handle it, let me know immediately. Xuemeng had no choice but to leave first. At this time, only the people of Beaten Manor and Zhangdong Hall were left at the foot of the mountain. Mo Ran withdrew his gaze from Xuemeng's back and said to the enraged group, I know how you feel, but the sword scrolls was not young Master Nangong's doing. If you want to settle the score, at least wait until Su Xuanglin was caught. These are two different things. Whether it's Su Xuanglin or Nangongxi, neither of them can escape. That's right. Both of them will pay the price. Zhen Kongming was one of the more rational people here. He glared at Mo Ran with red eyes. Grandmaster Mo, you're a grandmaster now. Your Shizun is also a grandmaster. Why should two grandmasters protect criminals and offenders? Mo Ran said, I just want you all to be fair. If you really want to get to the bottom of this matter, you should follow the rules of the cultivation world and send Su Xuanglin and the others to Tianyan Pavilion for questioning. The 10 great sects will discuss this matter together and will decide on a fair judgment. Why are you in a rush to tear up a person who doesn't even intend to fight back into 10,000 pieces? What's the point? Zhen Kongming. Someone shouted, what 10 great sects? 9. Can the Rufeng sect still be considered a sect? Zhen Kongming suddenly said, it's 8. There were bloodstains on his face. He had wiped them off for his manor master and then wiped away his tears. The bloodstains made him look very miserable and at a loss. It's 8 sects. Beaten manor should also not be included. Shikshan. He didn't pay attention to the cries of his junior martial brothers. He slowly turned his head and looked at Mo Ran. After the battle during the Heavenly Rift, Manor Master once said that the Shi Sheng Peak was a fair sect. Now it seems that he was wrong about it. Mo Ran. Zhen Kongming asked, Grandmaster Mo, are you sure you want to protect these two bastards from the Rufeng sect today? Before Mo Ran could answer, Nangong Si said in a hoarse voice, Mo Ran, please go. Ye Wangzi half knelt by Nangong Si's side and helped him up. It was really hard on her. She didn't cry or show helplessness, but her voice was also hoarse. Young Master Mo, go up the mountain. This matter has nothing to do with you. Mo Ran glanced sideways and said, aren't you a disciple of my Shizun for nothing? Since we are fellow disciple, how can this matter have nothing to do with me? Nangong Si, you. Mo Ran turned his head and looked at Zhen Kongming's face again. At this time, it wasn't just the people from Beaten Manor who were in front of him. Zhang Donghal's disciples also surrounded him like a tiger watching its prey. Huang Xiaoyu, supported by 2 female disciples, pretended to stagger closer. He gasped for breath, opened his eyes, and glared at Mo Ran. Then he waved away the 2 disciples on his left and right. He pointed his finger fiercely and said, since childhood, this old man has been influenced by the righteousness of the upper cultivation world. How can I just sit by and watch you act like this? Mo Ran coldly said, Huang Daozang is indeed a role model in the upper cultivation world. Just now, you were struggling at death's door, but in less than the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, you're actually able to stand up and begin to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens. I really admire you. You cough, cough, cough. Huang Xiaoyu seemed to be extremely angry. He clutched his chest and coughed until the sky turned dark. His acting was very good, but Mo Ran didn't even bother to look at him. Beaten Manor's green-robed disciples and Zhang Donghal's purple-robed disciples surrounded the 3 people in a circle. They approached step by step, but no one made the first move. Everyone knew that once first move was made, like spilled water, it would be difficult to take back. Zhen Kongming said in a low voice, Grandmaster Mo, I'll ask you one last time. Are you really not going to move aside? Ah! Before Mo Ran could answer, a sharp voice suddenly came from the front. He didn't know which female cultivator made the sound, but soon after, a pile of blurry black-gray mud and stones surged out from the crack in Mount Wang's barrier. Huang Xiaoyu said in shock, what's that? A landslide? Mo Ran narrowed his eyes. It wasn't a landslide. Everyone quickly saw it clearly and sucked in a breath of cold air. What surged out from the crack was wave after wave of charred fierce corpses. The arms of these fierce corpses were stuck to each other and clumps of their flesh was stuck to their bones. Thick fluid was still oozing out of them, so they could barely see their faces. Why immediately, someone couldn't take it anymore. He bent over and vomited. This is too damn disgusting. Are these all over the mountain? How many corpses were there? Mo Ran was also shocked. At this time, a heavy muffled sound came from the sky. The barrier that the sect leaders had just torn open was now moving again. Slowly, it seemed like it was about to close. This barrier could actually mend itself. Not long after it was torn open, it would close again, preventing more people from entering. Moran said anxiously, "Let's go up the mountain first. We'll talk about our grudges later. Su Xuanglin is on the mountain. Are we just going to let the main culprit escape without doing anything about it?" The people of Beaten Manor hesitated, but Huang Xiaoyu twisted his beard and sneered, "Almost all the experts in the cultivation world are on that mountain. We don't have to worry about not being able to catch Su Xuanglin. However, these two youngsters from the Rufeng sect are too slippery. They run as fast as loaches. If we let them go by mistake, we won't have another chance in the future." Huang Xiaoyu. Moran was furious. A red light flashed in his hand, and he summoned Jiangui. "Have you had enough?" The more than 100 people in front of him saw him summon his holy weapon. They all pulled out their swords and raised their weapons. They stared at him with extreme vigilance. Moran knew that this time, he would definitely not be able to escape a fierce battle. He was fine with it, but with how these people think, they would definitely implicate Shi Shengpeak in this matter in the future. However, at this time, he suddenly heard a deep and cold voice from behind him. "Everyone, please go up the mountain. Nangongxi will wait here. He will definitely not run away." Huang Xiaoyu said, "Boy, you speak so casually. Why should I believe you? For all I know, you could be planning to turn this situation around and escape." Nangongxi looked at him coldly. He stood up from the ground, then suddenly raised his hand and pushed Ye Wangzi out of the barrier set up by Chu Wanning. "See. This barrier allowed the people inside to leave, but the people outside couldn't enter." Nangongxi stood alone inside and slowly pulled out his sword. The bright light of the sword illuminated his face inch by inch. His chin, his lips, the tip of his nose. His eyes. Ye Wangzi already understood what he was going to do. She fiercely hammered the barrier and shouted, "Don't do this. When my ancestor established the sect, they passed on this teaching: greed, resentment, deceit, murder, rape, and plunder are the 7 things that I, a cultivator of Rufeng sect, cannot do." Nangongxi said, "My father was not a virtuous man and violated this teaching. However, I have upheld and lived by this in all my 26 years. Although I am arrogant, I have never acted rashly. I haven't done any of these 7 things. I have a clear conscience." With a buzzing sound, the sword flowed out of the sheath like water. "Don't." Moran also knew what he was going to do. He tried to undo the barrier set up by Chu Wanning, but the barrier was firm and couldn't be removed in a short time. He muttered, "Nangong." Nangongxi didn't even look at Ye Wangzi. He also didn't pay attention to Moran. He said, "Today, everyone is not willing to believe me. I have no other choice. Fortunately, I have learned the imprisonment technique. Now that I am imprisoned here, I ask everyone not to implicate the innocent. I, Nangongxi, imprison myself on the ground and will await everyone's return. Nangong." Before the voice disappeared, blood spurted out. Nangongxi's sword was instantly nailed to the ground, half of it was buried in the ground. At the same time, Nangongxi's left hand was also nailed to the ground. He actually nailed his hand to the ground like how a snake would nail its vital point. Lightning flashed on the sword and the spell of the imprisonment technique flew in all directions. Ye Wangzi knelt down. She knelt in front of the barrier. Nangongxi's blood flowed down the sword's hilt and dyed the ground red. No one could see Ye Wangzi's expression. Her face was lowered, and only her hands were tightly gripping the barrier. Her knuckles were pale and spasming. This was the imprisonment technique used to nail evil beasts, malicious spirits, and livestock. Almost everyone in the upper cultivation world knew how to use it. Everyone could recognize it. Nangongsi used this incantation to nail himself. He was in so much pain that his lips turned blue. He couldn't stop trembling, but he didn't cry. After a long time, he raised his face. His eyes were scarlet. He said, "Go." It was rare for Mo Ran to be shocked to speechlessness by someone. In his previous life, only Ye Wangzi managed to do it. And in this life, he met the person Ye Wangzi loved who did it as well. He was once confused as to what exactly Ye Wangzi liked about Nangongsi. Nangongsi was a brainless young master who was easily enchanted by pretty faces. What exactly did he have that was worthy of Ye Wangzi's regards? However, at that moment, he saw another Ye Wangzi. The one kneeling, the one in a mess, the one with blood flowing out, and not the one who was ruthless to the bone. Nangongsi. Go. Nangongsi roared. What else is there to worry about? Do you want me to nail my legs to the ground too? Go on. Zhen Kongming was the first to turn around. He returned to Li Wuxin's corpse, tidied up the sect leader's body and carried it back. Shikshan. Shikshan, aren't we staying? Shikshan. Are we just going to leave like this? Are we just going to let them go like this? Zhen Kongming said, what's the point of staying? We don't know how long they'll fight on the mountain. Are we just going to let the sect leader lie on the ground like this without even a proper coffin? The disciples of Beaten Manor looked at each other. They lowered their heads and didn't say anything. Zhen Kongming walked to Mo Ran's side. When he brushed shoulders with Mo Ran, he said, Grandmaster Mo, remember what you said. After this battle, we will see you at Tianyan Pavilion. Fortunately, in this world, there's still the Tianyan Pavilion that can uphold justice. Someone's eyes were bright red. It was the disciple who had spat and insulted Chu Wanning. He followed behind his senior martial brother with deep hatred. The pavilion master will definitely handle this matter impartially so that our sect leader can rest in peace. Mo Ran, Nangongsi, you evil people, just you wait. You will all get your retribution. Just wait for your death. End chapter.